So, 2025, how was it for you? I've got to say, I've had better years, it has to be said. I find myself in a slightly different place in December than I did in January. But hey, listen, stuff happens, as they say, and we're going to look back on the year from January to December. We want your input, of course, as well. So you can message us on X, you can message us on Facebook, you can message us through our YouTube channel as well. And if you are on the YouTube channel, don't forget to like it and subscribe to it. And also, you can join our Substack, where you get extra material every single day throughout the course of the Christmas holidays, apart from anything else. And we're going to give you plank of the day as well. But let's kick things off, shall we, with January, because it's amazing how you forget. When I looked back as to what had actually happened in January, it seemed so long ago that I could scarcely remember it. But January was when Tulip Sadiq, you might remember her, resigned as Economic Secretary of the Treasury over corruption charges, because not only was she Economic Secretary of the Treasury, she was also the corruption minister. And unfortunately for her, she got accused by a Bangladeshi court of being corrupt. And later on in the year, of course, she was convicted of that and sentenced to some time in prison. So that was the first kind of block that fell from Keir Starmer's government. It was also the beginning of Rachel Reeves's tax onslaught into ordinary working people that she said, of course, as we know her, Richard III. So she put VAT on private school fees, which of course meant for her that she would be able to hire something like 3,500 teachers and put them into the state system. But of course, you won't be surprised to know, they didn't manage to do that. So in fact, there are no more teachers in the system than there were. In fact, there's actually fewer teachers in the system than they were. So that was another broken promise by old Richard III.
I worked as an economist at the Bank of England before entering politics.
Rachel Thieves, as we like to know her. You know, another thing that I didn't actually realise until I looked it up was that in January also Bradford, that bastion of culture, that country, what was I going to say? I was going to say that country inside of a country, because it kind of is, began its year as the UK City of Culture. I mean, I don't know how that went. If you're from Bradford, maybe you can let me know. Luke Littler also became the world's youngest darts champion. The young boy who lives on a diet of kebabs and fish and chips and hamburgers has become a very, very wealthy man through the course of 2025. Also, Yvette Cooper announced the first of very many inquiries into so many things, because the one thing that this government does well is launch an inquiry. They don't necessarily actually hold an inquiry, they just say they're going to have one. And she launched an inquiry into grooming gangs, which of course didn't then happen. What they said was at the time, oh, we don't need a national inquiry into grooming gangs, we're just going to have a few local ones, because we've already had a national one. She also launched another inquiry into the murders in Southport by that ghastly, awful individual, Axel Rudy Cabana. And his trial started around about January as well, and he was sentenced in the end to a maximum or a minimum of 52 years in jail. Not bleeding long enough. And then finally, the one other thing that happened in January was the Office for National Statistics, and we often talk to Jamie Jenkins, who used to work there, predicted that the UK's population will reach 72.5 million by 2032. I think we're probably already there, don't you? So now we find ourselves in February, right? Now, you might remember this particular incident because it was famous all over the world, and it was, of course, when Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine went over to see Donald Trump, who had just taken over as president, of course, having won the election at the back end of 2024. Him and J.D. Vance in the White House, in the Oval Office, if you remember, suddenly started shouting at Volodymyr Zelensky. And people were outraged. They were going, blimey, you can't talk to him like that. He's like a war hero. Well, it turns out he's not really a war hero. He's actually somebody who's taken a great deal of money from a great many countries around the world. And he went to the White House, and Donald Trump accused him of actually not respecting the office of the president and not respecting America and not being grateful enough for all the money that he was receiving. And it was really quite the moment, and it really changed, I think, an awful lot of people's views on Zelensky. Some people on the left were like, Donald Trump's a disgrace, what a terrible way to behave. But actually, you know, in the long run, Zelensky came around, he eventually made up with Donald Trump, and, you know, they're still talking to each other. So that goes an awfully long way to telling you that Trump probably got that right, as he often does. It was also the first time that the Labour government under the auspices of Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, decided to do away with local elections. They announced that they were going to delay for a year the elections in East Sussex, in West Sussex, in Essex, in Thurrock, in Hampshire, in the Isle of Wight, in Norfolk, in Suffolk, in Surrey. And guess what? They didn't just delay it for a year, because now they're not going to have them in May of 2026 either. They're going to delay them for another 2 years. So actually, they're going to delay them for 3 years. So it's like democracy has been put on hold thanks to the Labour government. Absolutely extraordinary. They also lost another minister, in January, as we said. Tulip Sadiq went. Health Minister Andrew Gwynn was the one who got the heave-ho in February, because he put out some rather unfortunate tweets, including one in which he said that he was looking forward to the pensioners not getting their winter fuel allowance, because some of them who've never voted Labour in their life would die off, which was pretty ghastly, pretty awful, and he disappeared from trace. Also, the Prime Minister announced yet another inquiry, this time into the Nottingham stabbing attacks by Valdo Callaghan, of course, who was the guy who came here on a student visa, overstayed it, turned into a schizophrenic, and for some bizarre reason decided to start attacking young people in the early hours of the morning the year before. Absolutely shocking. Also, Rachel Reeves, Richard III, to you and I, was herself once again at the centre of an investigation. The BBC revealed that she'd been investigated while she was a senior manager at HBOS, when she was Rachel from Accounts, or Rachel from Complaints, and it turned out that she'd claimed for some expenses which were not actually kosher, if you like, and she was forced to answer an internal inquiry inside of the bank as to why she was claiming for things that she hadn't actually spent money on. It also, of course, was revealed that she then lied on her CV.
I worked as an economist at the Bank of England.
About working for the Bank of England for 10 years, because, of course, we know she only worked for the Bank of England for 5 years and not for 10. So Rachel got it in the neck as well. Punchy Labour MP Mike Amesbury, remember him? He's a guy that got done up for punching a constituent in Runcorn. His seat then eventually was won by Sarah Pochin for Reform. But he had his prison sentence suspended, so he didn't bother going to prison, which is unfortunate. And also the BBC got themselves into some hot water as well, because they had to launch yet another inquiry into how they managed to put out a documentary about Gaza without checking that the subject of the documentary was a boy, a teenage boy of about 14 or 15, who it turned out was the son of a Hamas official. Nobody bothered to ask the question, are you sure that this guy doesn't have a father who's in Hamas? Surely that would have been the first question that you would ask. And then, yet again, as we came to the end of the month, International Development Minister Annalisa Dodds resigned because the government slashed the foreign aid budget, because they said, oh, we need some more money to prop up their ailing economy, because Richard III's managed to screw it up so badly that we're going to have to do that. So, absolutely extraordinary stuff. February, a short month, but a very, very controversial one. Let's look at March now, the third month of the year, and the month that my mother would have been 101 in if she'd managed to survive as long as she did. She didn't, unfortunately. Keir Starmer convened the first sort of proper Ukraine summit under his auspices, and he promised to give Ukraine £1.6 billion of taxpayers' money in a missile deal. Nobody actually gave him permission to do that. He just decided to do it in and of himself. He also announced that NHS England was going to be abolished. I mean, you might as well abolish the whole of the NHS for all I care. But, what they've done is basically renamed a bit of it, and it's managed to make it worse than it was before. Absolutely incredible stuff. Reform UK also in the news in March, because they suspended Rupert Lowe and referred him to the police over threats that they said he made to Zia Yusuf. And that was the beginning of the split, which is still running like a bit of a running saw down the leg of Reform. Rupert Lowe's still very critical of them, as is Ben Habib. But that was the beginning of the sort of the contrariness of Rupert Lowe. And of course, it ended up with him being kicked out of the party. You might also remember Matt Hancock. He appeared before the COVID inquiry for the first time since leaving government many, many years ago. And sort of more or less apologised and blamed everything pretty much on Boris Johnson, not on the fact that he had his hands down the backside of Gina Lollobrigida, or Gina, as she was known, snogging away in his office. He didn't mention that at all, funnily enough. Also, Netflix drama Adolescence, that started and came out in March, and was the first UK TV show which wasn't actually made by any normal television company. So for the first time, they got 6.45 million viewers on the beginning of their first night, which was pretty damn impressive, it has to be said. Official figures also showed government borrowing up to 10.7 billion in February. It was higher than forecast. It was meant to be only 4 billion, so they spent an extra 6 billion of your money. Absolutely unbelievable. Also, van production came to an end at Vauxhall's Luton plant after 120 years. And you might remember, if you were trying to go anywhere on holiday, Heathrow Airport got shut down because some idiot managed to start a fire in an electricity substation next to Heathrow. And everybody went, how have you got an airport that can just be shut down by one fire in one substation? What have you done that for? And it turned out that the bloke who runs Heathrow, who's supposed to be some Danish bloke, was out on the RAS and wasn't able to come and make a decision because he was sleeping, because he'd had a few too many Negronis that night. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Also, Birmingham City Council declared a major incident for the first time with their bin strike. That was the beginning of it. And we have rats the size of dogs running around up there now. I think they're still there. I think if you're waiting for your bin to be emptied in Birmingham, you're probably still waiting. Absolutely incredible. And also Justin Welby, the outgoing Archbishop of Canterbury, said that he forgave his good friend John Smythe, who was busy abusing young boys for most of his career in the church. Justin Welby, of course, very forgiving person. Very nice for him too. And now, of course, the Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman. Wouldn't you know it? So that was March. We'll have April next. So we're into April already, the 4th month of the year. Extraordinarily, this was when two things happened that I think even you will be surprised at, because I'd forgotten completely that the cost of a first-class stamp went up and the cost of your BBC licence fee went up as well. And it hasn't been a great year for the BBC, but when you look at it in black and white, it's quite shocking. The cost of an annual TV licence went up to £174.50. In my head, I thought it was about 110 quid. £174.50. And worse than that, cost of a first-class stamp has gone up to £1.70, which is a good reason why nobody ever sends you any letters, basically. And it's also, by the way, not guaranteed that you'll get your post there the following day. They don't guarantee that anymore, so it might be first class, it might be £1.70, but there's no guarantee that it actually gets to its destination at all. Extraordinary. Also, the UK government took control of Scunthorpe Steelworks. You might remember that because it went out of business, and they put that complete and utter idiot Jonathan Reynolds in charge of it. Do you remember him? He's the fake solicitor. He's the guy who pretended for 10 years that he was a solicitor. And not only did he pretend to be one, he kept telling everyone. And funnily enough, I remember reporting on this at the time. He didn't just say, I'm a qualified solicitor. He actually spent an entire evening talking to, I think it was Luke Johnson, the entrepreneur, at a dinner party about what a great job he had as a solicitor. So the man is an absolute fantasist, right? He just continues to try and convince everyone that he was a solicitor when he in fact wasn't. I mean, most people in that situation would have to resign. But suddenly he's now in charge of British Steel instead, which he also knows nothing about. Absolutely bloody ridiculous. Also, the first of many cyber attacks happened. You know, lots of people say, nobody knows what happens here. You know, do you get hacked? I mean, some people have been hacked and some people haven't been believed when they were hacked. But Marks and Spencer's were hit by a massive cyber attack, as was the Co-op. And even to this day, nobody knows exactly what happened. The other big thing that happened, very much to the chagrin of the Prime Minister, Mr. Keir Starmer, who of course used to say that a woman can have a penis. That was a big theme, wasn't it, of 2025? I mean, I don't know what sort of women he hangs around with, but, you know, to be honest, I've never known a woman to have a penis in my particular experience. But according to the Supreme Court, they came out and ruled that only biological women, i.e. women who are actually born women without a penis, and a vagina instead, can actually be women. And so Keir Starmer eventually had to actually kowtow to the law, because he is, of course, a lawyer by trade, and he had to admit that he might have been wrong in the past to say that women could have a penis, and now he doesn't think they can. So it's bad news for Mrs. Starmer, isn't it, I presume? I don't know whether she's got one or not. No idea. Also, let's see, Labour MP Dan Norris was suspended after an arrest on suspicion of rape and child sex offences. And also, there was a huge tariff war that was kicked off by Donald Trump, because he basically said, if you want to sell anything to the United States of America, we're going to put a tariff on it, particularly if it's a car, around about 25%. So Jaguar came out, and it was the first of their problems. They basically came out and said, we're not going to sell any cars to America for the foreseeable future. Also, how about this? Satisfaction with the NHS in a survey came out to a new low. Apparently only 21% of people now actually feel any confidence about the National Health Service. Absolutely ridiculous. That's April. So here we are in May already. You know, doesn't time fly? And yet another cyber attack. This time it was Harrods. The Posh People's store was hit by a cyber attack. And again, nobody really knew what was happening there. Also, another milestone was crossed in the Channel. More than 1,100 migrants arrived in one single day in May, which is the biggest ever number. So, of course, they're still coming, even though the weather isn't so great now. And there's thousands and thousands more about to come between now probably and the new year. Gary Lineker presented his final Match of the Day show after 26 years. He was finally moved out of the BBC. After a whole litany of various things that he'd done wrong and got wrong and commented on. So Gary Lineker is no more. Also, of course, for those of you who like a bit of British sovereignty, David Lammy announced that the Chagos Islands would be given away to Mauritius. And not only given away to Mauritius, but basically we would be paying them to take it away. It was a bit like, as I said at the time on TV, it's a bit like you selling your second-hand car to somebody, but then paying them to take it away. So it's like they haven't bought it, but they now own it, and you're paying them to continue to drive it. That's kind of what happened. And so the Chagos Islands, which is a very, very sensitive piece of property down there off the coast of Africa, is now going to be accessible to the Chinese, who love a bit of spying on the UK. Diego Garcia, which is an American air base, is going to still remain an American air base, but we're going to be paying them over £100 million a year for the rest of time. Possibly one of the worst deals in history. Tesco, also hit by a cyber attack in this month. And of course, the one famous story that you might remember is Keir Starmer had an arson attack. Not for the first time, I suspect. Somebody attacked his somebody attacked his house where he used to live before he moved into Downing Street. Somebody attacked another property where he used to live, which I didn't even know he had, somewhere in North London. And they set fire to his car as well. And it turned out that the three men involved, who are yet to face trial, were three young Ukrainian male models. Now, obviously, I could not possibly ever speculate as to what that was all about. Nobody really knows, and it will all come out presumably in a trial. But I do wonder sometimes whether these were young men who were formerly women with a penis, because that could have been the case, of course. But it was a very weird story. We never quite got to the bottom of it, and we will presumably get to the bottom of it when the court case is heard. Keir Starmer probably would like to get to the bottom of it, but who can say? I mean, it's a very odd story, very strange month. Also, counter-terrorism police launched an inquiry into what happened, and they didn't think it was terrorism in the end, so it's really just very odd. 3 Ukrainian men. Very strange. Reform also won 677 out of 1,600 seats at local elections, and Sarah Pochin became the 5th Reform MP when she won the Runcorn seat after Mike Ainsbury had decided it was a great idea to go around beating up his constituents and got kicked out. So that was good news for them. Also, the FA announced that transgender women, i.e. women with a penis, aren't allowed to play women's football anymore. Amazing. Absolutely extraordinary. And so prison spaces also were freed up. This was another great idea of Keir Starmer's. They decided to free up some prison spaces so they could put some more prisoners in prison. But unfortunately, they let a load of lags out of prison who then went and committed a load of crimes and then had to go back into prison. So actually what they did was completely and utterly pointless and useless and hopeless. Well, that's May for you. So here we are in June. Already the summer months are starting to approach. You know, it's going to be Wimbledon soon. Sales of disposable vapes were banned in June in the UK. I don't know whether that's actually worked. I don't know whether people can still buy them or whether you can now buy them on the black market. But that was one of the things that Keir Starmer wanted to do. He also declared that we were going to be, as a country, at war fighting readiness. I don't know how that's going, really, but he claims that we're supposed to be at war fighting readiness just in case we get attacked by someone. And every time anyone says anything like that, I always think to myself, do you know what? I think that means basically that you're just trying to deflect everything. from whatever it is that's happening. I just don't think anybody really is interested in that sort of thing. One of the things I forgot to mention actually earlier, from a bit earlier in the year, which was in April, was that Keir Starmer announced the opening of a universal theme park. You might remember that, because we had a great deal of fun with it, because we asked people when I was on Talk exactly what sorts of rides there would be. And we had, for example, the HS2 ride, where you get on a train and it doesn't go anywhere. Because there's literally no track for it to run on. Or indeed, there was the dinghy ride across the lake, where you can jump on an inflatable dinghy. You don't have to sit inside it, you just sit on top of it with 100 other people, and they take you across the lake, and at the other side they give you a blanket and drive you off to a hotel where they give you some free pizza. That's one of the things. They also had the road to nowhere, which you could get on and just get speed cameraed up, and every time you go anywhere at any time with a car, you just get a speeding fine, that kind of thing. But let's go back to June. North Face and Cartier became the latest companies that were hit by cyber attacks over the course of time. Rachel Reeves announced that there was going to be an end to people being put in asylum hotels, but again, it wasn't straight away. She just said it's going to happen by 2029. I mean, Richard III, God help us. Starmer made another U-turn as he announced a full national inquiry on grooming gangs. This is after in January saying they didn't need to have one because they'd already had one. Now they decided they actually had to have a national inquiry. And don't forget, it then took until December before they could actually appoint somebody to be in charge of it. Absolutely extraordinary stuff. Manjaro became available via your local GP. So if you're wondering why everyone around you is losing a load of weight, it's because they're all on the fat jabs. Yvette Cooper also prescribed Palestine Action as a terror group. That's when she was Home Secretary, of course. And you might remember this as a big story, that Air India flight that took off in India and suddenly just crashed as it was taking off and lost power. And the one remarkable story was that one man was a survivor who was actually from Britain and somehow managed to walk away from the wreckage. And everyone was like, how has he even managed to do that? And a lot of people asked the question whether it was actually true, whether he'd sort of been on the plane in the first place, but it really was one of those miraculous stories and a miracle story of that particular month. And then finally, there were riots over in Northern Ireland, in Ballymena, because Romanian migrants who had moved into the area had been charged with raping a young girl. And so there was a little bit of unrest that went on for 2 or 3 nights in a row back then in the dog days of June. And also, just so that they get a mention, Wales decided to ban wet wipes for no apparent reason. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows why anything happens in Wales, really, do they? So we're midway through the year, we've reached July, and one of the biggest things that happened, of course, throughout 2025 was the reformation of Oasis. And that was when they decided to kick off their tour. They started it in Cardiff. And I mean, it was the hottest ticket that you could get anywhere in town, not just in Britain, but all over the world. I think they finally finished their tour in Argentina in about sort of, October, November time. So they were playing back-to-back shows and making absolute fortunes. Noel and Liam Gallagher back reunited for the first time since they had a massive, massive row. So almost 20 years ago. I mean, incredible stuff. Rachel Reeves, of course, back in the news as well, Richard III. This is when the month when she burst into tears in Prime Minister's Questions. You might remember when she was sitting behind Keir Starmer and looked for all the world like she was literally hoping to be anywhere but there because she was so sad. And her eyes looked puffy, her face looked puffy. We were told by the sort of Labour apparatchiks that, it was a personal matter and nothing to be concerned about. But it didn't look good. And even the markets actually moved on the basis that if this woman, Richard III, is this, emotional, how the hell can she run the country? How the hell can she run the Chancellor's office? And how the hell can she run the Exchequer? Very good question. Also, the BBC sacked Greg Wallace from MasterChef following more complaints that he used to run around naked apart from a sock covering his penis. I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, imagine somebody thinking that was an okay thing to do in the workplace. You imagine coming home from work and you go to your wife, how's it going? Yeah, how was your day at work? Yeah, it was great. Took all my clothes off and ran around with a sock on my cock. I thought that was okay. Apparently it wasn't. I mean, what's wrong with these people? Anyway, Ozzy Osbourne also passed away in July, and Jeremy Corbyn announced a new political party, but we didn't know what it was going to be called. It turns out that was obviously the pre-formation of your party, as it's become known. You know, Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn couldn't organise a piss-up in a brewery, basically. Also, there was a hosepipe ban announced by Thames Water for 1.1 million people. There was a drought declared in the Midlands because, of course, you know what happens in the summer. It gets hot, nobody's got any water. Also, junior doctors voted to go on strike. And even as you watch this, they're probably on strike again just before Christmas. And then, of course, the one-in, one-out system also was brought into play. This is the ridiculous notion that Keir Starmer said would stop and halt all illegal migration from the asylum seekers coming across the Channel. He said basically that if they come here and they're not allowed to be here, they'll be sent back to France. And then we'll bring somebody else from France who's allowed to come, which basically means we're still importing more people than we're exporting. So if 100 people come and they all get sent back to France, we then get another 100 to come in their place. It's completely mad. And it's not one in, one out. It's one in, I think it's actually, no, it's one out, 17,000 in. I think that was the way it went. Absolutely ridiculous. Also, ONS data showed that borrowing got up even more, £20.7 billion now being borrowed in the previous month by the government. And the Home Office also declared that they'd spent £2.1 billion on asylum hotels in 1 year. Absolutely extraordinary. And Donald Trump arrived in Scotland for his first trip there since becoming president for the second time. And if you remember, he hosted Keir Starmer at Turnberry, which looked for all the world like Keir Starmer was his bitch, it has to be said. And he just sat there. And remember when he said, I don't like that guy, Sadiq Khan. You know, he's nasty, horrible. And he went, oh, he's a very good friend of mine, actually. Yeah, and made himself look a complete plank. But there we are. That was July. So we're in the dog days of August now. And one thing you can always tell about August is that then more statistics come out. The Home Office admitted that 111,000 applications have been made for asylum up to June of 2025, which is an awful lot of people. 14% up on the previous year. And of course, you know, these are not just people that have come here illegally on boats. These are people that have also come here legally to train for some job or other for the purposes of studying, and they've overstayed their visa and they've then decided to apply for asylum. So these are people that we let into the country willy-nilly, but 111,000 applications up to the first half of the year in June. Extraordinary. Operation Raise the Colours started, and that was when people decided to become very patriotic and put some British flags up. The Union Jack, of course, or the Union flag if you prefer, and the Cross of St George. People started painting roundabouts. It became a very divisive issue because, of course, all the lefties were like, what are you doing? You must be some kind of fascist. And, of course, people were saying, well, no, we actually just quite like the idea of flying our own flag. What's wrong with that? So they got on with it. David Lammy had a visit from J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States of America, and he took him to his Grace and Favour country estate, Chevening, I think it was, and they went fishing. But Lammy's such an idiot, right? He didn't actually have a fishing licence. He didn't apply for a fishing licence, didn't ask whether he should have one, and so he'd actually broke the law by fishing in a river with J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States of America. And they both got hauled over the coals, but they got let off. They didn't have to pay a fine because I think he did it on the grounds that he's an idiot and just pleaded, you know, insanity or something. Anti-migrant hotel protest started as well in Epping, of course, where the Bell Hotel was housing many, many migrants and had been for many, many months. But it also happened in Canary Wharf in London as well, and also outside Altrincham, a hotel there up in the sort of suburbs of Manchester, and lots of demonstrations were held, and lots of people turned out for them, and the Pink Ladies kind of first came to prominence during that month. Food inflation was recorded at 4.2%. You and I both know that's a very, very low figure. It should be a lot higher than that, but it was the highest figure for food inflation in 18 months. Also, they announced a record low fertility rate for the UK, which now stands at something like 1.41 for people living in England. And of course, what we do know is that in other countries in the world, many, many more people are being born. In Nigeria, which I think has now got the highest fertility rate, it's something like 5.1 for every family, whereas here it's less than 2 for every family. Also, Angela Rayner is in the news. She was accused of avoiding stamp duty when she went to buy her home in Hove. This is a place that she basically decided to buy to house both herself and her boyfriend in, who lives down that way. But rather interestingly, what she decided to do was to get the deposit money from her own disabled son's sort of private stash of money that he was given as compensation because he was injured by the NHS. So he's got a trust fund, effectively, which he lives off, and she plundered it in order to buy a house. It's nice, isn't it? It would later, of course, lead to her resignation, which didn't happen in August, but would happen very soon thereafter. Also, yet another cyber attack. Jaguar Land Rover suspended all of their car production because of a cyber attack, and it meant that they didn't produce any cars whatsoever for about 3 months, which is quite extraordinary. September coming next. So here we are at September. We're getting towards the September of our year. And the UK's long-term borrowing cost reaches its highest level since 1998. This government just keeps borrowing more and more money. They're borrowing £20 billion basically a year, most of which is used to pay off the interest on what they've borrowed before. So at least 10 billion a year, or 10 billion a month rather, is going out in repayments on the borrowing that they made from the month before. Absolute recipe for disaster. Graham Linehan was arrested by 5 armed police officers at Heathrow Airport for a tweet that he put out that somebody didn't like. Anti-trans, of course. Later on, he was absolutely and utterly cleared of any wrongdoing. And the police, I think, in the end, apologised. And of course, all of those people who said that he was a transphobe were cheering to the rooftops, going, "This is great. Of course he should be arrested." And everyone normal was kind of going, "But why was he arrested by armed police officers?" And they all went, "Well, it's because he's at the airport and the police officers are all armed." Oh, yeah. Okay, then. But no, nevertheless, a very, very dark day for justice in this country. Angela Rayner decided to resign after admitting that she'd underpaid her stamp duty, because it's all about whether it's your first home, your second home, your third home. She had a Grace and Favour house, of course, as Deputy Prime Minister in Admiralty Gate, which was in London, just down the road from Buckingham Palace. She also had her home up in Manchester, where she, I think it was Ashton-under-Lyne, her constituency, where her son lives. And then she has a flat in London, and then she has another house in Hove that she bought. I mean, what's going on with these socialists? They've got so many houses, they don't know what to do with them. Anyway, she had to resign after admitting that she didn't pay the right amount of stamp duty. That was the end of her. Reform had their first big conference of their existence, really. They had it at the Birmingham NEC, the National Exhibition Centre, which I was actually at, believe it or not. I was asked very nicely by them to appear as the head of a panel when we talked about crime in the state of this country and how bad the crime actually is. Peter Mandelson got himself into some hot water as well, because of course it was revealed that he had sent a message to Jeffrey Epstein, which was uncovered in a diary, and it made it look as though he was a bit more friendly with Mr. Epstein than he should have been. And of course he was in the role of, at the time, ambassador to the United States of America. So he was living very high on the hog in a very beautiful house in Washington, DC. He later had to resign that month because it was all a bit untenable. And then he was spotted just about a month or so ago, I think it was, coming out of somebody's house in Notting Hill and having a pee against a tree. Amazing how some of these people fall from grace. Peter Mandelson, of course, always a slippery character. I'm sure he'll be back at some point. Prince Harry appeared in the UK after having lost yet another court case with the government about his security, because he keeps telling everyone how dangerous it is for him to visit the UK, but he somehow managed to get here without getting killed. And he went to visit his dad, King Charles, of course, who was suffering from cancer. They had a meeting for the first time, but it wasn't very long. It was about 35, 40 minutes, and that was that. Unite the Kingdom rally took place, where many, many hundreds of thousands of people turned out, depending on which particular news organisation you looked at. According to the BBC, I think it was 100,000 people that they said were there. People who were actually there said it was more like 1 million. And I would say I'm probably happy to sort of land on a figure of about 500,000. I would think it was about 500,000 people. But it was a very, very big display of national unity, a very big display of people who just wanted to go out there and say, we're very proud to be British, we're not going to be pushed around anymore by all sorts of other people who come to this country and who don't like it. And it was, of course, described by the BBC as a sort of far-right rally, which obviously upset quite a lot of people who were not far-right at all, and celebrate the fact that Britain is indeed a great place. Heathrow Airport was hit by a cyber attack in August. That's what happened there. And Sarah Ferguson was taken away from several charities that she was supposed to be involved with because there was another email that was discovered between her and Jeffrey Epstein, where she basically said what a great guy he was and she was terribly sorry about what had happened. But it was all very embarrassing. So all these children's charities that had her representing them asked her very nicely to step down. And of course, not only has she now stepped down, but she's also now been removed from her house of grace and favour with Prince Andrew, who's no longer Prince Andrew. He's now Andrew Mountbatten, something or other, because he's had all his titles stripped away from him. And they've been told to go and live in a tent somewhere, which is probably what he should do. Shamala Mahmood ordered an inquiry into migrant taxi rackets. As after The Sun, I think, newspaper did a story about how frequently migrants are basically being shipped around the country in private taxis because the Home Office thinks it's a good idea. So, for example, we remember hearing a story from Folkestone of a guy who was down living in a migrant hotel in Folkestone, but he had a doctor's appointment in Leeds, and he was taken up to Leeds in a chauffeur-driven Mercedes. The chauffeur-driven Mercedes waited for him to finish his doctor's appointment and then drove him back. So that was the racket, and it's still going on. Also, Starmer, the Prime Minister, announced his plan for a digital ID scheme, which nobody wants and nobody thinks will work, and everybody thinks is an absolute scam and a ruination. Donald Trump also made his second state visit after going to Turnberry in Scotland and seeing Keir Starmer. He came back to Britain, this time for the second time. I think he's the only president who's ever been invited twice for a state visit, and he had a very nice time, hosted by King Charles at Windsor. Didn't see Sadiq Khan, as far as I know, but was very, very happy to be back in the United Kingdom. So that's September for you. October, this is a big month, particularly for me. We'll get to that in a minute. Michelle Moan's husband was ordered to repay £122 million for those COVID medical gowns. Remember when COVID happened, a lot of people got involved in suddenly starting up companies that nobody knew that they did before. And one of Michelle Moan's husband's companies suddenly decided that they'd become a COVID gown wearing organisation, and so they churned out millions and millions and millions of these COVID gowns to send to hospitals, but they were never worn and they were never used. And so now he's been ordered to repay £122 million. There was an attack on a Manchester synagogue, you might remember, by a Palestinian activist who managed to shoot one person dead. The police also tried, in their hope of killing him, they unfortunately managed to kill somebody who was inside the synagogue, but luckily he wasn't able to gain access to the synagogue, and so frankly a lot more people were saved than were killed, and he himself was killed by the police after being tasered, but it was a horrible, dreadful, ghastly attack. Dame Sarah Mullally was named as the new Archbishop of Canterbury for the first time. A woman, not with a penis as far as I'm aware, has become the Archbishop of Canterbury, so she'll sit in the House of Lords. Former BBC DJ Tim Westwood was charged with rape and sexual offences. Prince Andrew was told that he had to now relinquish every single royal title. He's now going to be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He was kicked out of his house as well, so he's got to live like a pauper. Probably not that bad for him, but you know, nobody really knows what he's going to do with himself. Ed Miliband, the crazed Ed Miliband, promised 400,000 new jobs in the clean energy sector, but that's the same as him offering us 300 quid to pay for our electricity bill, which of course we still haven't seen. The only thing that's happened to the electricity bills in this country since Ed Miliband's taken over the green energy sector is they've gone up. They haven't gone down. Absolutely ridiculous. Maccabi Tel Aviv, a football team, said that they would not take any tickets for a game against Aston Villa. And this was a big story, actually, that month, because it turned out that, of course, Aston Villa, which is right in the centre of Birmingham, Aston to be precise, said that they couldn't guarantee the safety of the Israeli fans because of the fact that it's such a hostile environment. It was a very dark day because they were basically saying, so what you're telling us is that if Jewish people come to this part of Birmingham, you cannot guarantee that they will be safe, i.e. they might be killed just because they're Jewish. It was a shocking state of affairs. And then the big story of October, of course, was me. I was taken off the air by Talk TV and asked to account for myself regarding a couple of things that had appeared on social media. And it ran and ran and ran until the end of October into November, when I was eventually fired. Although my lawyers keep saying I wasn't actually fired, they just didn't rehire me, they didn't bring me back. But anyway, here I am. much happier, much more grandiose, and ready to go for the brand new year of 2026. So now we get to November. We're nearly at the end of the year. Incredible, isn't it? Have you, like me, been surprised at all the stories that you'd forgotten about? Because I was absolutely gobsmacked when I realised how many things that I didn't know had happened, but they had happened. So let's get on with November. Rachel Reeves, Richard III, made a pre-budget speech. She was later accused of leaking almost the entire budget before she actually announced it towards the end of November. But 4 weeks ahead of when the budget was going to be announced, she more or less gave the game away and said, oh, well, the thing is, we're going to have to raise more taxes because we've got loads and loads of bills to pay and we haven't got any other way of collecting the money. And of course, everybody was like, oh dear. And then later in the month, of course, on the same day that she was supposed to deliver the budget, the actual budget was leaked about 41 minutes ahead of time, where it was just so ludicrous and ridiculous. She, of course, got away with it. She threw the head of the OBR under the bus. That's the Office of Budget Responsibility, Richard Hughes. He ended up losing his job, even though it wasn't really his fault. But yet she still remains in place, I'm afraid. This message timed sometime just before Christmas. So forgive me if she's ended up resigning by the time you see this. I'll be very happy for one, but I don't think it's going to happen. The NHS started warning about a long, drawn-out flu season, which of course we're still bearing the brunt of. They're telling us that they can't get anybody into hospitals anymore because there's so many people sick with the flu. That goes on. Jerry Barton was found guilty of sending offensive messages to Jeremy Vine and a few other people, but he ended up getting a suspended prison sentence. A lot of people were outraged by the fact that he was done at all, albeit that he said some pretty horrible things and some pretty vile things on social media. But do we really want to start prosecuting people for doing that? You know, a lot of people are asking that question, and we may well talk about that coming up in the new year. David Beckham was knighted by King Charles, so it's now Arise Sir Becks, which a lot of people thought would never happen. And dozens of prisoners were released by mistake, thanks to David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, who has no idea what he's doing. I mean, this is a bloke who literally couldn't answer any questions on Mastermind. The only ones he didn't get wrong were the ones he passed on. He just doesn't understand anything. Absolutely ridiculous. Tim Davie resigned as the Director General of the BBC, as did Deborah Turness, who was the head of news. They both resigned from the BBC as a result of a whole litany of terrible things that had happened, including the Gaza documentary, including the Gary Lineker problem, including all sorts of other shenanigans that went on at the BBC under their sort of watch, if you like, and under their control. And the final straw, really, was just the fact that they didn't seem to have any kind of clue about who was running anything inside of the BBC and what the shows were doing. Forget about all the sex scandals. Forget about Hugh Edwards and Tim what's-his-face, Tim Westwood. Forget about all of that. I mean, there's just so many things that were wrong with the BBC. And so they're now looking for a new Director General. We don't know who that's going to be. And of course, one of the main kind of reasons why they ended up having to pass and leave their jobs was because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, President of the United States, of course, is suing the BBC for £10 billion because of a Panorama documentary in which some wise ass decided at the BBC to splice together a couple of different bits of Donald Trump speaking back in, the first, 4 years ago, I guess it would have been 2020, when he lost to Joe Biden, and he was kind of literally refusing to leave the White House and talking about what people should do down at the Capitol building. The BBC basically spliced two different pieces of audio together and video together to make it look as if he was encouraging people to commit violence down at the Capitol building in January, I think it was January the 6th of 2020. Just ridiculous, unbelievable. And, you know, they call it a misedit, but it's not a misedit, and that's why both the head of the BBC and the head of news at the BBC had to go. Keir Starmer also got himself into a bit of hot water because he faced, for the first time, a proper leadership challenge. You know, people like Wes Streeting were starting to talk about maybe taking over. Andy Burnham was starting to talk about the possibility of running for leader and even taking a seat in the House of Commons, making somebody give it up so that he could become a contender to be the new Prime Minister. And basically, as we speak, going into the new year, Keir Starmer's coat, as they say in Scotland, is on a very sugarly peg, and it's more than likely that he won't be Prime Minister come this time next year. A COVID inquiry report came out and basically said the response to COVID was too little too late, which I'm not sure is the right answer at all, because, you know, can you imagine if they tried to do more than they already did, which was to shut everything down and ruin everybody's business? David Lammy announced plans to do away with jury trials. We're still feeling the brunt of that. We don't know yet whether or not that's actually going to happen. And the Home Office announced that police and crime commissioners are going to be scrapped because basically they're no bleeding good. There's no point to any of them, and it's just a waste of money. Finally, of course, the Daily Mail agrees to buy the Daily Telegraph, and that's all going through at the moment. So they're all going to be in one big happy building somewhere in Kensington, no doubt. And finally, Rachel Reeves' budget.
I did not come into politics to raise taxes on working people. So my promise to you is this. Labour will not put up your income tax, national insurance, or VAT.
Yeah, well, we know, as we said earlier, it was all leaked beforehand, and it was all awful. And all it was another excuse to rinse us and take more money off us. Council tax up, income tax up, national insurance up, everything up. And the government still in massive debt and not really in any position to stop borrowing. So we know it's just going to go from bad to worse come January. December's coming next. So the final month of the year, December. How has it been for you? How has 2025 been for you? Maybe what you should do is send us all a note over the course of the Christmas and New Year holiday, and you can tell us what your 2025 highlight or low light was. Put it on X at IROMG, put it on Facebook if you like, put it on our TikTok account, put it on our Instagram account as well. That's the Mike Graham Show, of course. And if you're on Substack, put it on there and maybe we'll pick it up, the mikegrahamshow.com. That's where you want to go if you want to watch the live show without any adverts. If you don't mind the adverts, you can watch it on YouTube, where you can like it and subscribe, of course, as well. So we'll see what that all does. We mentioned him in the last month because, of course, Richard Hughes resigns in December as head of the OBR. An inquiry found out that the leaked budget wasn't actually leaked as a result of a hack, or it wasn't the result of a hostile act. It was just some bright spark who was in the media who worked out that the PDF file that was leaving, that had all the budget details in it, which was on the internet and which was on the website of the OBR, was easily accessible. All you had to do was put a different number in. So, for example, the 2024 budget was there under 24. If you put in 25, you got the new one. I mean, not exactly secure, is it? Completely and utterly ridiculous. An independent police inquiry found that 12 senior police officers should have faced gross misconduct hearings over Hillsborough, but it turns out, of course, that they won't because they're not in the police anymore. So once again, the cops go away with it. The Women's Institute came out and said it won't offer membership anymore to trans women. That would be women with a penis. You're not allowed to join the Women's Institute. And also, you might remember the Crown Jewels were attacked by some eco-nutters. This is not Just Stop Oil, it's not Insulate Britain, but it's the latest incarnation of Extinction Rebellion. And they decided to throw custard and I think it was rhubarb crumble all around the Tower of London. Absolutely ridiculous. They all got arrested, quite right too. 21 people were treated in hospital after a pepper spray attack at Heathrow. Yet another sort of random act of madness that nobody can really quite explain. Government announced £175 million was going to be given to 50,000 young people so they can all get a job, because it now turns out there's more than 900,000 youngsters between the ages of 18 and 24 who are not in education, training or work, and who basically are not doing anything at all, so sitting on the backsides. A COVID report said £10.9 billion was lost to fraud, and they're never going to see it back. They're never going to be able to get it back. Super flu was the name given to this particular virulent form of flu, which is rushing its way through the NHS. But it doesn't appear to be any more dangerous than anything else that's ever happened. And on the 13th of December, after 28 days of no one coming over the channel because of the weather, 737 migrants arrived, thereby sort of putting to the sword any idea that the government actually had somehow managed to stop them from coming, because they hadn't. Mass shooting at Bondi Beach, which we've spoken about on the show many times, of course, that happened on a Sunday afternoon, late afternoon, early evening. 16 people left dead as a result, including one of the shooters. It was one of the most horrible and horrific anti-Semitic attacks on the Jewish community in any part of the world, but certainly in Australia. And also, the most recent story of all, the Bank of England reducing interest rates from 4% down to 3.75% just the week before Christmas, which is the big story, which might be something that if you've got a house, you'll be very happy to hear. So it's about the only piece of good news I can really bring you. It's been quite a year, hasn't it? As I say, I've certainly had better years. I started it off in a slightly different situation from the way I ended it. But we're looking forward to next year, 2026, and we can't wait to get started with our new breakfast show, which is going to be starting on January the 5th. 7 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock every single weekday morning. And it's going to be live. We're going to be taking your messages. We're going to be reading them out. We're going to be breaking news. We're going to be doing paper reviews. It's going to be fabulous. Eventually, we're going to be taking calls as well. And I can't wait to get going. It's the Mike Graham Show. And you can find it on YouTube, as I said. And you can find us on Substack as well, themikegrahamshow.com. Happy New Year. So I've been asked to make a couple of predictions for 2026. So here goes. And you can do your own as well if you want. Send them in and we'll read them out on the first week of the new breakfast show, which of course is the Mike Graham Show, which you will see and find on January the 5th, right here on this very channel. The first prediction I'm going to make is the BBC is going to pay out to Donald Trump because Donald Trump has sued them for £10 billion, or $10 billion maybe, in a court in Miami. I think they'll want that to go away. And whether or not they decide to waste a load of money actually representing themselves in a court in Florida, some bright spark will say, no, why don't we offer him 20 million quid and see if he goes away? And he will probably do that because he'll be more than happy to take the money. Thank you very much indeed. I also predict that by the end of the year, there will be very serious conversations going on about doing away with the licence fee, which, as we told you, now costs £174.50. Outrageous, right? So I think by the time we get to December of 2026, there will already be, if it hasn't happened, discussions about doing away with the licence and bringing it in some form for people who want a particular service, or maybe even doing away with it altogether and just getting adverts on. That could happen. Secondly, Keir Starmer, you know, the man that I've been predicting will lose his job before the end of his term is actually up. I think this will be the year that it happens because even if he manages to limp his way through to May for the local elections, even though he's trying his best to try and cancel as many of those elections as he possibly can, he will be absolute toast come the end of the day when they've lost practically every council seat that they've ever had and when they've lost the Welsh Senedd. And when they've done really, really badly, probably in Scotland as well, and lost out to Reform. So I think Starmer, if he lasts until May, that'll be a miracle, but he probably won't. And he'll probably be gone before that, if it all looks really, really bad. And the same goes for Richard III, Rachel Thieves, who, of course, is inextricably joined at the hip with Keir Starmer because they're both as useless as each other. The good news is, of course, that when Richard III lost the Battle of Bosworth Field, he was replaced by the next King of England, who was Henry VII. So I'm not suggesting that the new Chancellor of the Exchequer will be called Henry, but you never know. It'll be very confusing, of course, for David Lammy, because when he was asked who was the successor to Henry VIII, he actually went the wrong way and went Henry VII. That was his mastermind story, which was completely and utterly hopeless. So Henry VII to replace Richard III, and the economy still to go down the gurgler, I think is probably fair to say. Angela Rayner may come back as well into the cabinet because I think Ed Miliband will end up becoming the new Prime Minister because everyone that says that they know how the Labour government works and Labour Party works says that he is a shoo-in because he's the most popular man inside the Labour Party. So she will come back into the fold. I don't think she's going to be the leader, even though she would really, 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 really like to be. And then she'll probably buy like another 3 or 4 houses, maybe plunder some more money from her son's trust fund. Who can say? Of course, the one major prediction which I can get right is that the Mike Graham Show will become the hottest property in the media, and we will be the most fabulously watched and most busy breakfast show on the planet. And I think we will become the biggest breakfast show on the planet, and we will do all that in the first 12 months of 2026. Happy New Year.